Well, now that we've modeled and UV mapped our object, let's test it and take it into Unity. Now, as we saw before, we can import this as an FBX file directly into Unity. So what I'm going to do with the layer selected here, I'm going to go ahead and just hit the A key and select everything. Now, remember we've got two objects. We've got the legs and the couch, right? But if we select everything with the A key and come over here to File and Export, what we can do is export the selected objects only. Now, as we know, there were other objects in the scene, but the thing I like about this particular process is you can select exactly which objects you want to transfer over. So if you've created the entire scene, the entire environment in Blender, and you only want to take one particular updated model back into Unity, this is the way to do it. And this is really the way I prefer to do it, kind of one object at a time and then place them in Unity. So I'm going to choose Selected Objects, and I will come up here to my Exports folder, and I'll just go ahead and call this Couch. So now I'm putting it in an Exports folder outside of Unity currently. I could go ahead and browse directly to the Unity project in the Assets folder here and put it right into the Models folder of Unity. Well, let's go ahead and do that as well. I'm going to go ahead and leave it as Couch and just click Export FBX. So it's really up to you how you want to do it, and every studio or company has their own ways of organizing their files, managing their updates, things like that. So if you're just working alone, it may be tempting just to get all kind of unorganized and throw things wherever you want and not name things well. But I really strongly suggest, even if you're just working on your own, to really establish an organizing scheme right up front. It's going to help you. All right, let's go over to Unity and see what we have here. I'm going to open up Unity, and in the Assets folder under Models, here's my couch. Now, one thing about it is our scale factor. How did we do with scale back in Blender? Well, let's see. I'm going to take the couch and drag it over into the scene here, and it pops into the center of the scene at 0, 0, 0 because I've dragged it over into the hierarchy. But let's take a look at it now. It appears to be a little big. But how do we know? How do we know how big this should be here in Unity? Let's go back to Blender and take a look at our scale. So remember we created that 6 feet scale here. If I select it, I can see it's right down here on this layer here. If I press Shift and click that layer, we can turn it on, and now we can see here it is. Here's our 6 foot scale. So we need to do a little work in terms of getting the couch the proper scale. So I'm going to select both the couch and the feet, and I'm going to move this pivot point to the center of the grid, to that cursor. So I can come over here to the Tools tab and press Set Origin and Origin to 3D Cursor. Now the origins of both of these objects are here in the center of the grid. So if I select them now, the feet and the couch, and press S and scale it down a bit, we can begin to get a sense of how big this should be. If this is the size of a person, I'm going to hit the 3 key and the 5 key, maybe the 1 key to go to the side view. Here we go. And if I scale this down, how big do you think that's going to be? About like that? It's really up to you, of course, and you can go and measure exactly how many centimeters a particular object is and make sure your units of measure are set over here and the N key to open up the Properties panel, and you can come in here and actually type in the exact dimensions in here. But I'm going to go with just kind of a gut feeling here. I'm going to select these, and let's see. Let's say if he's 6 feet tall, that's about it right there. Let's try that. I'm going to hit the 5 key to come out of orthographic view, and I'll press Shift and click this layer again to hide that. Now let's hit A and do this again. So if I had only exported out to that external exports folder, I would have to delete what I had in Unity and then bring it in again. But what I'm going to do is just overwrite it directly in Unity. So I can come over here and just go to File, Export FBX, choose Selected Objects. I'm in the Unity project here, and I'll just select Couch again and Export. And now it's going to overwrite what I had in Unity. So let's come back to Unity, and there's our couch. So now we can see that this is the actual size it needs to be. And of course we can move this around to wherever we want it to go. Notice here that the pivot point is in the center of the object. I've got the center pivot point, or the center, turned on. If I turn to pivot, notice that the pivot point drops down to where I had it on the grid floor. And also notice over here that even though there's one file here, if we scroll that little triangle down, we have the two different objects here in Unity, each with their own material that we created and named over in Blender. Also, if we go into the materials folder here, you can see we've got couch fabric, couch wood here in the materials. So what of course I like to do is make sure that everything is all nice and tidy. So I'm going to take these materials and move them over to my materials folder that I created and just get rid of this one here. So now I have the models in the models folder and the materials in the materials folder. All right, so now that we know how to get our model from Blender into Unity, we now need to deal with texturing it. And once again, there's a couple of different ways that we can do this. So let's talk about those couple of ways here. I'm going to go back to Blender, and let's go back to our UV editing screen layout here. And I'm going to center it up with the period key, hit Tab to go into edit mode, and hit A to select all of my polygons. And if I hit A over here, you can see all the UV islands for my UV map of the couch. Now what I want to do is find a material that looks kind of cheesy. I want to find a fabric texture that looks kind of old and nasty. And I found one on textures.com. I've been using textures.com for quite some time now. This is not an ad or a plug. I'm in no way connected with them whatsoever. But I've used them for quite some time. It's a subscription service, and I like it quite a bit. They do a good job of providing kind of a wide range of textures and giving us some good seamless textures. So what I've got is some downloaded textures here. I've got a fabric that I like, this one here. Now you have to admit that's kind of ugly, and that's exactly what I'm going for. And this is a seamless texture. Now if you tile this one right after the other, one right next to the other, you won't be able to see a seam very easily between the tiles. It flows into itself from one side to the other. And we'll talk about creating our own seamless textures here in a bit. But I just wanted to go through a couple of different ways of texturing your objects using this seamless texture. Alright, so let's go back to Blender. And I'm going to open up a node editor by clicking on this little tab right here and dragging down in the UV editing screen layout. And I'm going to change this window from a UV image editor to a node editor. And there we go. So we've created this couch fabric material on this couch. And here are the material nodes. Now remember that I've got the Cycles render engine chosen here. I think, as I've said, it's a really good render engine. I just have it on by default now when I open a new Blender project. If you have Blender or anything else selected here, your node editor is going to look a little different. And keep in mind, we're going to be using the materials and the rendering in Unity, so what you choose here is not that important. But what I want to do is bring in that fabric texture right into the node editor here. So I'm going to come down here to Add and choose Texture and image texture. And here is a texture node. Now you can also press Shift A and get the same menu here. So I'm going to click open, and I'm going to browse to that textures folder I had with all my textures in it, and here's the fabric pattern here. I can click on this icon and see all the images. So here it is, and I'll click open image, and I'll go ahead and connect it up to the diffuse node right here. Now I can't see it yet in my viewport because I need to switch from solid to texture. And now if I tab back into object mode, you can see the fabric on the object, and it doesn't look too good. So what we need to do is actually duplicate or multiply the number of times this texture is on our object. So to do that, I've got a properties window open over here. If you don't have this, you can always click on the little tab right here, that corner tab, and drag a new one out, and then change this to a properties window here. But I'm going to go ahead and right click on this, click join area, and put that back like that. So here I have a properties panel, and I'll go to the material panel here, and we can see we've got couch fabric. We've got an image texture hooked up right here. And if I click on the plus for the color, you can see I've got that fabric pattern plugged in right there. Now if I go one panel over to the textures and switch, if you're on brush, switch to image texture, now we can see the mapping settings for our image texture. And right over here under scale, I'm going to click and drag all three of these and maybe plug in like 5. Let's try that. And now you can see how it's been multiplied 5 times over the object, and we're beginning to get a little bit more reasonable pattern on this. I think it's still a little too big. I'm going to drag select all 3 of these and type in 10. Yeah, that's beginning to look okay. I think that's about the right size we'd want for that, right? Let's try a little bit smaller. Let's try 12. What do you think? Too small? I'll go with it. So let's go with that for now. And let's see if we can duplicate this pattern, this way of texturing our object in Unity. So in other words, what we've done here is we've mapped the texture to the color channel of our material. And then we've multiplied the scale to shrink that pattern down. Let's go try it over in Unity. So I'll open up Unity here. And here's our object. I'm going to go ahead and click on the couch and come over here and click on the couch fabric right here. And now we can see that material here. And we've got an albedo slot here, and that is the color channel. So what I'm going to do is I'll just go to the assets folder here, and I will open up my Finder window, and here is that seamless fabric right here, and I'm just going to click and drag it right into the assets folder here, and it will copy that file into the assets folder of Unity, and there it is. Now I'm going to take this and click and drag it right into the albedo slot, and there we are. So basically same kind of a process, and I'm going to take the color swatch here, and it's a little bit of a gray. I'm just going to move that right up to solid white. When a material comes in from Blender, it's going to have that slight gray to it. If you create a material directly in Unity, it'll be pure white. So if it's coming from Blender, you're going to need to just move that up to white. So there is our texture. Once again, it's a little too big. So right down here under tiling, this is where we're going to do our scale again. So what did we have at 12 in Blender? So I'll type in 12, tab 12, and hit enter. And now there is our fabric in Unity. Now that works pretty well. If we just have an object that needs a repeating texture, this works pretty well. However, what if I want dirt on this? What if this couch needs to be really old and nasty and have stains on it and all, and dirt? How am I going to layer dirt on this over the fabric texture? Well, in that instance, we're going to need to use a paint program like Photoshop or GIMP or Corel Paint or Krita, some sort of paint program. where we can export the UV map out of Blender, build up the layers of textures in, say, Photoshop, and then export them out of Photoshop and bring them into Unity. So in the next video, we'll take a look at doing that.